Okay, looks like we're live back here on YouTube. And hi, welcome back. Quite enjoy these live streams. What have I been up to? Oh, it's fun doing a bit of live stream. I often feel quite high after doing them. I don't know if it's talking so much or if it's helping people along their journey. That's what I like to think it is anyway. So anyway, here we are back in my regular slot, 6 p.m. on Tuesday. Today, we just finished, a group of us therapists here at the Leela Center, just finished Total Life Change, 7-day intensive, helping participants along to make some major changes in their life. And I'm always I think what gets me is also the level of change people get in a week. Not just, I bring in a lot of body-based stuff, but also, I'm quite familiar with quite a lot of interactive psychotherapy, kind of get in there psychotherapy. And there was a few older people on the course this week, and it was more appropriate to do that kind of stuff with them. And it's also satisfying, it's also satisfying to hear people's stories and for them to be in an environment where they're open to receive some feedback and finding, it's a real art giving feedback, I think, as a therapist, when to go in there and say something in a way that the other person can receive it, because, a lot of us are very trippy about getting feedback from anybody. A lot of us have been put down by people in authority in our time. And so, it's quite a journey of trust, I think, to receive feedback. But I'm happy really with the way I can give feedback these days mostly, and how people can receive and take it in. And I'm always learning. I'm always learning. A little bit of tea here. Someone was telling me about this interesting book, and I just bought like a little summary of it because that was an option. The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Sounds possibly Dutch, maybe Swedish or something. I'm not really sure. But anyway, I saw on Amazon they had a little summary of it, which I was expecting to be a little bit longer than this, about 20 pages for £3 or £4. But nevertheless, I kind of like the idea of having a summary of a book, because people are always, constantly messaging me or asking me for good books to read, and I have to tell them I don't really read non-fiction books. I don't really read many mind, body, spirit books. And in a sense, because I do read fiction and stuff, but in a sense, that's almost a kind of personal position that I take, in that, it's what you get from books is it's like walking around the swimming pool, as I used to say in therapy groups 10, 20 years ago. You get participants, they kind of walk around the swimming pool. They're waiting to see if they're going to jump in or not, and this phase of reading about therapy, reading about ideas about the body, about trauma, about, books about men's issues, and stuff like that. I was recently reading a bit of Iron John by Robert Bly, and all these books are all very well and good. But of course, it's just walking around the swimming pool, and maybe they give you a bit of inspiration to really jump in. And actually what's missing these days, it wasn't quite so missing when I started doing therapy nearly 20 years ago, is really these kind of workshops where you really feel like you're jumping in the fucking swimming pool, where you're really jumping into all your shit. You've got some level of guidance, and you're gonna swim. And there's people there who make sure you don't sink, essentially, which is the role of a workshop leader. And so, that in a sense is why I don't really bother with the reading so much, because my work is heavily experiential. And, you can read all you like, but all the reading is ever really going to, yes, reading can create some level of transformation. You can receive new ideas. You can reframe things differently or whatever. And I get inspired by bits of reading, no doubt about it. I also am a writer. But there's nothing like experience, and there's really nothing like experience. So, I'm very happy really, in the sense that I can take a position not to read too much and not to get into too much of that stuff, and really, value experience and being able to create experiential workshops for people. And that's a little bit of a lead up to talk about, you know, the main project that I'm just getting off the ground now, which I'm very excited about, is Project Man, which is something I've been meaning to get together for about the last 6-8 months. And then now I've got a venue, I've got it all organized. I'm just creating some more promotional material, and I need to do a couple of little videos explaining about it. But it is for men, essentially, particularly guys in their 20s and 30s, but other age groups are welcome, you know, who want to stop walking around the swimming pool. They've read the books, you know, they've read the books about men's issues and the plight of men in the post-industrial era or whatever, you know, and they're ready to really jump into a more interactive all-male environment where real change can happen, and you can really, you know, experience just how powerful about how powerful it is to work with guys, because there's virtually no framework on the planet outside maybe of some kind of, you know, so-called primitive tribes people in Papua New Guinea or South America somewhere, where you can really do this. You know, there's very, very little. To be fair, the Mankind Project do a bit, but I'm working more with interactive body-based therapy, and it's a little bit different from what they're doing, and that's no disrespect to them. I think they're a good organization, and I also don't like to charge, to be honest, the kind of money they charge. They need to charge what they need to charge, you know, 500-600 quid for a weekend. It's fair enough, you know. I don't make comments about it, but I wanted to do something that was accessible for younger guys who aren't on high income, and so Project Man will be that, and the first one will be coming up in February 2nd to 3rd. In Brighton, non-residential, and I think it's a nice place to do it because also Brighton is a cool city and there's a lot going on, so you know, you can get cheap accommodation and have a good time in the evening after the group. You know, I always, when I run groups, I say to people, especially when I'm running guys groups, you know, we're going to work in the day, guys, we're going to work, you know, you're going to be looking at your shit, you're going to be doing some heavy exercises, there'll be times when you wish you weren't fucking here, but in the evenings we can chill out and have a good time, and you can go out and party and do what you want. Anyway, let's check in on the chat. Luja, hey man, good to hear from you in the Faroe Islands. I read tons of books, okay, mostly about non-duality, but also about body trauma. I'm glad I'm jumping in. Yeah, it is like, do you find it like that also? You know, you kind of have this phase of reading about stuff, and then at some point it's like, okay, what would it be like if I jumped into a workshop and did something really full on, you know, where I was really challenged, but in a held environment where I know it's going to come out okay, you know, where I'm more on the edge of my comfort zone. You know, I find it like that. I did read a few books early on when I started to do groups, you know, a little bit here and there. Anyway, man, good to hear from you. And Lawrence, yeah, Lawrence, hi there. Could you say something about a healing crisis? Well, you can give me more specific personal information if you want, or if you don't feel to, that's okay. But essentially, you know, we do go through crises. You know, it's like, what happens in reality is your mind develops a sense of self. You know, this is the ego, the personal self, and we have an idea, you know, a self-image held in the prefrontal cortex, if you're going to get a bit technical up there, an idea about the kind of person we are, you know, and that's essentially in many ways a kind of defensive posture. You know, a lot of people develop a kind of defensive self-image, particularly in Europe, you know, someone not quite good enough, you know, wants to fit in, can't quite, bit of a rebel, bit of this, bit of that kind of thing, or whatever it is. But, you know, for deep change to happen within you, when very deep change starts to happen, this self-image is thrown out of the way. You know, often the level of emotionality coming up in the body is so intense and deep that the self-image is kind of blasted out of the way for a while. And we go through a crisis, you know. And the thing to do really is just to do some good stuff for ourselves. Hopefully not just stuffing ourselves with chocolate all day. Do good stuff for yourselves and keep breathing and feeling the body, and try to keep moving, even if it's in a slow way, it's okay, forwards in a positive direction. Forwards in a positive direction. You get healing crises in psychology. You get them also in, you know, when you're doing fasting. I used to do a lot of fasting. Well, for a while I did, about 10, 12 years ago. We do these 28-day colon cleanses here at the center, you know, a whole group of us. And you go through immense healing crises there, because the cells start to, after about a week, open up and get rid of all the shite they're holding on to. You know, you're working deep in the body. The cells throw out all this gunk into, you put bentonite in your colon, basically. You eat bentonite, it sits there and exerts an electrical charge inside your body, and your cells start to dump all the shit. And you go through healing crises, times essentially when you feel like shit, when you feel like you don't have a direction to go in. You don't know what's true and what's not true anymore. And these are deep phases of change within the psyche. And you have to, you know, it's good to say, yeah, talk about healing crisis. It's good you say that, because it's good to recognize what's going on as a healing crisis and to be able to frame it as that. Because what's important in that kind of situation is that you can keep moving forwards, even if it's only slow. Even if it's only step by little step, and before you are moving real fast, as long as you can keep moving forwards, or at least not go back, you know, not crash into back negative behaviors. You know, we all know stories of people, you know, recovering from addictions. You know, they have a bit of a crisis and they go straight back there. There's other factors in that neurologically as well. But, you know, the important thing is that you don't go back. You give yourself the support you need, and you keep taking steps forwards, and you'll come back. I always remember doing very intense encounter groups. Encounter therapy is like where you go for a workshop for 2, 3, 4, 5 days, and at some point you have to give up all your judgments about the other participants, and they tell you all your judgments about you, and it would completely, you know, then you scream a lot about, because it brings up a lot of feelings inevitably, and then you scream for an hour at everybody and stuff like this. And they were great workshops to let go of stuff, very, very intense and grueling, particularly for the British, so we have quite a complex social image. But what I would notice afterwards, I had very little clue who the fuck I was for some period of time. And then at some point, things would just come back, and I'd have little tasks to do. Usually, you know, after doing all this, you have some house care or something where you do menial tasks to support the community a bit. And that's good, actually, you know, and have some food and stuff. And then at some point, I would kind of come back online in a slightly different form. It's not like I've completely gone, but there was really the sense for me for a few hours after doing these very intense encounter sessions, but I did not really know who I was anymore. My sense of self had been blasted apart to some degree, and then stuff comes back, you know, stuff comes back, and there's been a letting go somewhere, and you get used to that after a while, you know, when you're on this intense phase of change. I hope that's useful to you, Lawrence. I know you've been following for quite a while. It's good to hear from you, man. Rupert, do you know anything about Wim Hof's breathing technique? Yeah. If so, would you recommend combining it with Bioenergetics? Thanks for another live stream. Yeah, I know the Wim Hof breathing technique. I never actually paid the 200 or 300 euros or whatever it is to do Wim Hof's thing. But I have quite a bit of experience with breath work from leading rebirthing, and also, you know, I did a bit of holotropic breath work with Stan Groff thing back in the day. And I like Wim Hof's technique, but it's a little bit sort of astral out of body for me. Hard to explain that exactly, but when I'm doing kind of cold, if you look back on my site, I do on my YouTube channel, I have done the odd video about cold training, as I call it, working in the cold. And what I tend to do as a breathing technique is more like the Osho chakra breathing or somatic breathing, where the intention is to really breathe and feel inside the body, particularly around the base, perineum, which is a spot you can kind of find or approximate in your awareness between your genitals and your asshole, basically, or in the belly, in the gut. And, you know, I would go outside sometimes and sit, you know, in my boxer shorts in -3 temperature and breathe into my belly. Do that. I will do the Osho chakra breathing, which is breathing into 7 different bodily centers up and down for an hour, basically. The last 15 minutes would be pretty grueling when you have to just sit and you're not even allowed to do this kind of high intensity breathing. And I find that better personally, but I have nothing against Wim Hof. I think he's a great guy and I think it's very good what he's doing. But these kind of, some breathwork techniques take you out of the body a little bit. And I feel a little bit that's what happens with him. I never talked to him about it. I don't know him personally. But when I did the Wim Hof technique a bit, I think there was 30 kind of strong breaths in and then this kind of thing. I had a little bit the feeling it was taking me a little bit out. And what I prefer is more really breathing into the gut. Because what I used to, I mean, I have a long history of leaving my body basically from a lot of trauma in childhood, then being into all the usual drugs in my 20s, and then the healing drugs in my 30s and stuff, you know. And what I actually needed and continue to need is to be able to really come back, and the belly is the central point of anchoring within the body, you know. So there's nothing wrong with Wim Hof's techniques, and I actually do recommend people, particularly with the bow and arch, it can be great to do some level of somatic breathing, really breathing and feeling inside the body. In fact, the last video I put up was a demonstration of this, and I'll do a bit more. And you can use the Wim Hof technique. That, you know, it's not going to, you know, do you any harm. If you're familiar with that and you enjoy it, then combine it with some bioenergetics. You can even do it at the same time. Like I say, for bow and arch, you can increase its potency and its power. Basically, I just uploaded a video called 8-Minute Arch. I think it was called Advanced Bioenergetics. And by doing this, the bow and the arch, and breathing at the same time through into different bodily centers, one, it keeps your focus more in the body, you know, and secondarily, you know, it's kind of, it almost gives you something useful to do while you're in this rather painful position, or what can be rather painful when you start it, you know. So I'm quite a fan at the moment of doing some level of somatic breathing, which just means breathing into the body, basically, a technical sounding term for it. Combined with bioenergetics. I think it's a good approach, because all you're really doing in bioenergetics at the end of the day, and indeed in any body-based therapy, is quite simple. You're expanding the range that you can feel, you know, feel both human-centered emotions, anger, sadness, love, lust, jealousy, whatever, and also just the physical sensation of your body. You're increasing the level to which you can feel, you know. Anyway, I won't talk more about that. Let's check in the chat. Jordan Stankov, what bioenergy found to give the most release and the most growth? For me personally, there are 3 basic exercises that have definitely moved me a lot. They have a bow and the arch, which I'm still doing a lot of, what I call the triple opener, or the belly activation, you can find on my YouTube channel, and also this, what I usually call teenager release, which is shoulder movements like this, you know, we do for quite a while. I'm going to do another video about that, just to break it down even a little bit more obvious for people. But they are the 3 exercises that when I get a bit further down the line with writing my book about bio, I will put those 3 as core exercises, because I think also for most Western people, and I think the gut exercise, particularly for men who want to develop their male side, you know, are really essential. Really essential. The bow and the arch is generally taken in most bioenergetic therapists I'm familiar with, or schools of it, or whatever, which is not so much about, as a real core practice. And I would add those 2 other exercises to them. For me, those 3 exercises of themselves will move a phenomenal amount. And there's other stuff you can do, of course, as well, and different ways to work. And when, you know, for example, when I'm running a longer workshop, like a 2 or 3 day intensive, you know, it's not always appropriate to do constant intense exercises standing up. You know, it can be a bit draining for people, and it can go past the point to which it's useful. So often, for example, on those of you who've done spiritual boot camp, I know Lucius has, you know, we do a lot of standing up intense exercise in the morning, and in the afternoon it's more lying down exercises where, you know, the focus is different. There's still intense exercises, but they work in a different way. They're not so physically intense. They work in a different way. So it can be good to have a real repertoire of exercises. Cool. Rupert, many thanks for your explanation. I never met. Oh, cool, man. Cool. Glad to hear you're getting into it. Mohammed. Hi, Dev. Nice to see you, boss. Hey, boss Mohammed. Hope all's good with you. Good to hear from you. Labas Bikia. It seems our mind resists, even when we practice bioenergetics, what to do in that case. Well, you know, this is the case, you know, as I mention often in videos, and I talk about increasingly, is the power of the defensive layer, particularly when you're working on your own. And the defensive layer, I don't know any neurological underpinnings for it. There may not be any, or it may not have been researched that much. But it seems that for the first couple of years of our life, there's a program that runs in the brain that stops us from feeling very intense emotions, presumably because we're not ready to feel on that depth. And the trouble is that, of course, you know, we get to be 5, 6, 7, the brain development is complete, or pretty much complete. And we are ready to feel these things, but the body has stored them away and the defensive layer is still operating. It seems rather like almost a rogue gene in the human psyche somewhere, and it's had huge, huge social effects on us. So people carry around phenomenal amounts of trauma. And so you need to find a way, if you want to really get the development, Nasima, you need to find a way to commit, is the bottom line. And you have to be pragmatic about it. Don't just be hardcore, sergeant major-ish. For most people, that doesn't usually work with bioenergetics. It might work with the gym, it might work with yoga, but it doesn't usually work with bio, because the bio has quite strong emotional content. You open up areas of the body where there is trauma, where there are holding patterns, where there are dead areas where muscles have been disowned, where feelings have been disowned as well, So, you've got to be quite pragmatic about it. Look what you need to keep on, for a start, to make, a good daily schedule or weekly schedule of bio that you can do, that you can commit to, something really tangible and honest that's realistic for you to do. And then you can also write down all the excuses. We had a thing about a year ago I put out called the Book of Resistance or Book of Excuses. Write down all the excuses you use. A third thing that can be very useful for some people, I find it very useful, is to recognize that if you're in the middle of doing an exercise and you suddenly get an urge to stop, and the brain, for me, my brain will usually say, there's no point in doing this now, nothing's happening. There's no point in doing this now, nothing's happening. Just stop, and what about that message from Fred? You're supposed to reply to that 3 days ago. You haven't done that either. My mind says things like that, is to have an aha moment and recognize that this is happening because underneath the surface, something is starting to move. And so when you're doing an exercise and, these resistance stories come up, there's no point. That's the usual one I get. A lot of people get that as well. To use that as a signpost to stick with it, that something is going on underneath the surface. Because this defensive layer operates between where the shit is, that we're trying to get conscious, and where our awareness is now. A bit like the surface of the sea is what we can feel now, and the bottom of the sea is where all the gungy stuff our brain's been storing, the old trauma. And in the middle is this defensive layer. And when this stuff starts to rise, before it comes into our awareness and we can feel it and be free, it hits the defensive layer. And the defensive layer's job is to get you out of there, to get you to stop provoking that feeling by stopping the exercise. So, you can use that as a marker, because it is difficult to work on your own. In the old days, everything was done in groups. It was very, very hard to work on your own. But if you understand the defensive layer deeply and you've researched your own defensive layer, then you can do a lot of work on your own and move a long way on your own. But it's actually rare so far to find people who seem to have managed to do that, but I always look for a way. I'm on YouTube, it's not the same as being in a group room and stuff like that. I spend a lot of time in group rooms, but it's not the same as that. And I do always look for ways that people on their own, a lot of people living, maybe there's not even another person in the same country doing this kind of work, quite possible in a lot of countries. So I do look for ways to support people who either don't have the time, money, or time, money, or possibility, geographically, to do workshops, to do group work or one-to-one work. How can they move forwards? And a lot of it comes down to understanding resistance and understanding the defensive layer. There's also, I should mention, certain exercises you can use which start to move the resistance, that you can put the energy of resistance into. The best example of this that I know is the kind of teenager release from the shoulders, where, I'm going to do another video about it soon. Let me make a note of that. But essentially, that's the exercise that, you can also put a lot of the kind of resistance and negativity into it. When you watch teenagers, and they got the hump, teenager time is when you're still under the control of your parents most of the time, particularly the early teenage years, but you're pissed off with your parents. You want to let them know, yes, you're going to do what they say, but basically, fuck you is your feeling, and they do this kind of resistance, this downward movement of the arms is very good when you're really feeling resistant to doing something. You know, just do about 5 minutes of lifting your shoulders up and throwing them down. I said downward movement of the arms. That was a mistake by me. It's the shoulders. I see people doing this from their arms, kind of waving their arms around, their shoulders staying level. Doesn't really do very much. It's got to move the shoulders, lift them up and throwing them down. And, I don't want to do this. Shit. Do that for 5 minutes with a bit of sound. You don't have to scream and shout that place down, you know, bit of sound, or let your throat be a little bit open. And that can also, it kind of makes the resistance physical. And when you make resistance physical, then it starts to change. Other things you can do, you know, along the same line, you know, exercises I used to do when I was doing a lot of therapy, receiving a lot of therapy, you know, often you'd have a kind of complaining exercise. The British love to complain, you know, so you'd walk around the room really physically complaining with everybody, and complaining about the workshop, complaining about the workshop leader, complaining about your life partner, whatever it was. You just complain and complain and complain and make it really loud and physical. And it takes a layer of resistance out. It takes a layer of resistance out. You can try this. You can try this. You can also do it with blaming, self-blaming, you know, all sorts of stuff. You can really just, and that gets it out. People think you have to scream and shout a lot, and you don't have to scream and shout a lot. I did years of screaming and shouting therapy, and I ran therapy workshops like this for a long time as well. And it is great work, but you don't have to do that. You don't have to really scream and shout all that much. You know, if you've got the space to do it and you've got a therapist there who knows how to hold it, then it's great. But, you know, you don't have to make a lot of racket just to put that in. Okay, who's up next? Vivian Keeble. Hi, Dev. I'm coming on Friday. I booked up today. Great. You're coming for a depression and anxiety workshop. That's wonderful. Great, Vivian. Look forward to meeting you. You booked today. Cool. Yeah, it's quite a small workshop that usually, so you get a chance for a bit of personal attention and stuff like that. I enjoy that workshop. It used to be the anger group originally, and then I started to wanted to make it more open to people who were interested or suffering with depression or anxiety. And I enjoy working with people. Some therapists don't want to work with certain categories of clients, you know, it'd be their worst nightmare to have a whole room full of depressives, you know, and certainly, you know, in the room. But I always find these things interesting, and we'll do a bit of talking, and we'll do a lot of exercises, and so you'll get hopefully some useful stuff. That's great, Vivian. Great, you're coming. Hope you don't mind me saying the name of the workshop. I suddenly mind fucked about that in there. Anyway, guys, let's have a look. I'm going out in about 20 minutes time, but if you've got a question, then do put it out. Like I said earlier, you know, any guys still tuned in, then do check out Project Man. I'm going to get busy with promoting that soon, because it's the first one. I decided to make it quite a cheap price, you know, for a workshop, just to see if we can get a nice enthusiastic crowd in the group room. And I can only really take 20 people max. And you do have to be a guy, basically, because it's a guy's workshop. But it's going to be going on in Brighton in early February, and it's really worth checking out. What else? I'm pretty busy at the moment. You know, I'm pretty busy. I've got this workshop running at the weekend, and then as soon as it finishes, I've got to driving off to Heathrow, because I'm going to Nepal with my girlfriend for 10 days, and then I come back like a Thursday week after that. And then Friday I'm running Man Up, which is another men's group, but that's a men's group residential here at Leela with Bioenergetics, and also some good kind of interactive work that we do. Suavo leads that. I join in a bit, but really, you know, getting men to step up. So I look forward to that. And that's right before, it's pretty much right before Christmas. I think about another week then. Must be finished about the 14th or something like that. Is that right? Could be totally off base there. It could be a week before Christmas. No, it's not. Then it's Christmas after that. Getting confused. Anyway, yeah, that's the time. And then January, I seem to be mega busy. I was planning to move to Brighton in January. I'll still be here at the centre, but also to do about 4 days a week in Brighton. But I looked at my schedule and realised I'm booked up nearly the whole of bloody January. So it's going to be a little bit tricky. I'll have to see if I can get some time to get it together. Hey, Jordan, thank you for your answer, Dev. What do you focus on when doing an exercise, breath or body? I mean, basically with bioenergetics, try and focus on the body and keep breathing through the mouth nice and deep. the main area where, you know, most people lose track or go wrong, and particularly it happens, I don't know if you're in this category, for younger guys, you know, they want to up the time they do the exercise, but you've got to focus on really getting the position right and really breathing through the mouth throughout. That's where most of the change actually comes from. You know, they do the bow and the arch, and they message me and say, I'm doing the bow and arch in 15 minutes. And when I see them, they're kind of holding their body really tight and tense when they're doing it. And it's not achieving a great deal. So it's very important to focus on the body, but to make sure that you are breathing deep. You know, you are breathing deep. So, you know, that's the main thing. When you do breath work, you focus on the breath and the movement of the breath into the body. But basically, and there's nothing wrong with focusing on the breath, to be honest. But, you know, you need to, the main thing is that you stay in the body as much as you can. You know, we always go out when you start to do an exercise like this and you start to breathe deeply, you will catch yourself going out. You just bring yourself back. Don't beat yourself up. Keep breathing and feeling. You can always, as a default, if there's no other guidance, feel into the belly. You know, that's the main point of connection, where the body is really energetically anchored on a very deep level. So that's a great place to always breathe and feel into. Vivian, where will we be working in Brighton? Well, there's a couple of places where I use the studios. One is the Mayday studio in Regency Square, and another is the New Fit studio, kind of yoga and dance place over on York Place, which is actually opposite St. Peter's, off Old Stein. It's not called Old Stein when you get that bit further, that bit up, just before it turns into London Road, essentially. I usually work out of those two places. I'm going to run Project Man out of the New Fit Centre because it's a bit bigger and they got a bit of aircon in there and stuff. But yeah, that's where hopefully I get a lot more stuff, get some more stuff going in Brighton. And one-to-ones, I often use the Mayday studio, and I also run some groups down there, some one-day workshops. My next, I've got a couple of, I've got Project Man going beginning of Feb, and I think a week or two after, I've got a one-day bioenergetics group going in the Mayday studio. If you look on my website, Devaraj.org UK, you can find details for those. So there's stuff going on. I'm bringing stuff out. Nasima, seeing the benefits of bioenergetics, I'm wondering why we don't speak about whether in media or even with therapists. Just trying to understand. Seeing the benefits of bioenergetics, I'm wondering why we don't speak about whether in media. I guess you mean you don't speak about bioenergetics much. It's been around a long time, but it hasn't really caught on big time. I think most of the big therapies haven't really, you know, there's a vague sense somewhere in people's minds about the kind of therapies where you go and scream and shout, or people have vaguely heard of primal therapy. Maybe some Americans have heard of encounter therapy. Not many people have heard of bioenergetics, really, you know. Trauma release exercises are a little bit popular now in the UK and some parts of the States, which are kind of like, to me, a small subset of bioenergetics. But, you know, it's fair to say that the body hasn't really come in yet. You know, in terms of even mainstream therapy, you know, psychotherapy is still dominant, really. Psychotherapy is still dominant. What's been interesting in the last decade is the degree to which mindfulness has come in, which I also like. And mindfulness is, I mean, bioenergetics in many ways is just a kind of upgraded version of mindfulness. Because with mindfulness, one approach is to just breathe and feel the body, which creates a certain level of acceptance. And in bioenergetics, you're doing that, but you're also opening certain specific areas of the body, muscle groups, where old trauma is held and hidden, you know, older patterns of conditioning are held and hidden, and then you just be mindful to them. So in many ways, the only real difference between bioenergetics and mindfulness is with bioenergetics, you're going in there to really look, as opposed to kind of, in a sense, waiting for stuff to come up for you to process it. But, you know, mindfulness aside, I mean, the job of the mass media is not to heal people. Make no mistake, you know, it's to sell them things and to maintain the kind of patriarchal establishment. That's basically what they're doing. You know, I did a video not long ago about selfishness, you know, which stirred up a few feelings for people I know here and there. But, you know, individuality is your real trip, the deepest trip that you can go on. Who are you really as an individual? And sometimes you have to do a lot of group work and healing first But then that's the biggest trip. And what you'll see is no one in the mass media and no one in politics wants your individuality. That's as simple as that. They don't want it. They don't want it. For the Labour Party, you know, the left wing, the socialists, they want you to just be part of a group thing with a top-down structure telling you what to do, you know. That's all they want. And you have to believe that's the best. The liberals all want you to just kind of engage in some kind of positive activities for society so they don't feel guilty, you know, and all this kind of thing. And the right wing just want to maintain the kind of worst aspects of a patriarchy, you know. So there's no one in politics, there's no one in the mass media who has any interest in you, you know, really being an individual. And bioenergetics teaches you this, because all it really does is take out the blocks. You know, it's not about reconditioning your mind, you know, to become a different kind of person. It's not about, you know, you becoming a different kind of person. It's just about taking out the blocks, and what's left is you, essentially. And the simple truth is that there's very few forces out there that really want you to do this, you know. And to a degree, that's okay, because it really is the challenge of the individual. But I needed quite a bit of support along the way. And so I'm quite happy to give other people support as well, you know. That's probably a rather long answer to your question. I hope it's useful, or maybe you had something a little more specific. Lujas, my workplace may pay for me becoming a TRE provider. I'm working with challenged people, brain damage. Great, man. Fucking great, you know. That's cool. Last I heard, the training was about 1,400 quid, you know. If they're going to pay for that, that's brilliant, man. Excellent. Yeah, I know a few TRE people, you know, and it's not, you know, yes, within the kind of framework of body-based therapy, I don't consider TRE to be super, super deep, but the fact is it is out there, it is increasingly recognized, and it can be a massive healing for many, many people. So I think it's brilliant, you know. It's a little bit egotistical of me to put it down in the sense that it's not as deep as bio can go, you know. It's absolutely great that it's out there. Sometimes when I have people from TRE or people who are massively into ayahuasca in my groups, I feel motivated, if I can see they can take it, to really give them something challenging to show them just how deep this shit can go. But, you know, I do have the professional responsibility to make sure I'm not overdoing it with them. Yeah, little therapist ego games, I suppose. Hey, Devaraj on Facebook. Okay. Not completely sure. I get so many people coming through my life on social media or group rooms, but I hope you're doing good, man. Jordan, I've been doing bioenergetics for a couple of months and I'm breathing deeper than I ever have before. Great, man. What's the biggest change in yourself or your students? I mean, in the last year, the biggest change for me has been getting much more belly centered. You know, developing the triple opener myself and learning how to do some belly activation, you know, which I've also made videos out on. But that's given me the biggest change. You know, it's more and more anchoring down into the belly, and that's a lot what I'm teaching now. A lot what I'm teaching, particularly for guys, you know, because I think if you're a man, you know, it's great to develop your feminine side and to be more heartful and to feel. But if you haven't also developed the classic male side, the gut-centered male, you know, then you're missing out. You know, I think if you're born male, you've got to develop the male side first, and then, you know, develop your heart side by all means. You know, I'm not against that kind of work or femininity in any way, but the way I see it is, if you're a guy, you have a certain responsibility somewhere to really develop your male side. And for me, you know, I find that has been the biggest change for me in the last in the last 12 months, definitely. And breathing deeper is excellent, man. You know, it does give us a certain grounding and power, and it strengthens our male side. You know, it's really it's really important work, this bioenergetic work. I actually, before I even got to I did do bioenergetics for quite a bit in the old days, but before I got to a point where I was really into it and wanting to teach it, I actually did about 3 years of myofascial release with a very good therapist in Glastonbury, and I used to go and see him weekly, then fortnightly, then monthly, then dropped it off a bit. But he did a lot of muscle grinding into the muscles to open up my chest a bit more. And then at some point I could see I really wanted to do it with the bio, because then it was my own body releasing as opposed to a therapist kind of doing it. But that was very useful for me, you know. And I also recommend, if there's therapists around that you think are good, you know, get the money together to go and do it. It's good. And then at some point you can really take yourself on. I find that's been my experience. I've always been a bit resistant to paying for therapy. Even now, you know, I won't fork out a fortune for stuff usually, unless I feel I really, really need it. You know, I don't like to. I like to keep things accessible, price wise, and that's how I am a bit. That's the biggest change for me, is in that sort of really deeper kind of male side presence. You know, being able to really access down in the gut there. Mystic planning. Okay, I've been trying the screaming bio method and I feel good. Thanks, pal. You've a man. Cheers, Nick. Cheers. I'm happy that it's working out for you, man. That's cool. Jordan, I've tried the belly opener, but I find it very difficult to do. Can you recommend something for that? Well, I mean, if you've in mind, we can always do a one-to-one session sometimes. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to, if you give me a bit more info, what the difficulty is. I mean, usually when I'm teaching a belly opener or belly activation, I think it was called originally, it's got 3 elements. You know, you keep your body position pretty much the same, feet wide apart, outsides of the feet parallel, ass down low, knees bent. And then initially you just breathe and feel into your belly. You know, breathe and feel into your belly. And then the second stage is the growling sound in the same position. And the third stage is this triple opener thing. As I breathe, I get very lightheaded. Yeah. I mean, that is quite common. If you're feeling, if you get lightheaded and dizzy, something you can do, if you're open to it, is to make yourself throw up. Is one possibility. You know, that can sometimes really clear some belly blocks. I often see people getting lightheaded doing it. It's a pretty powerful exercise, and it can also go through layers. There can be times when it's easy and times when it's really not easy. That's what I'd recommend if you're open to it. You know, it's kind of a thing. I'm getting into this vomiting business, and certainly the gag reflex I've been into for a few years. It's a kind of it's one of those bits where somewhere there's a huge social stigma or something about doing a gag reflex. You know, putting your fingers down your throat just seems like really wrong or bad. But it's a very healthy thing to do. The one caveat being that if you do have a history of eating disorders, sometimes it's not the best thing to do unless you've got some support that you don't re-trigger the desire to kind of exert a lot of control over your food and stuff like that. But, you know, that's something I would recommend if you're getting lightheaded. Certainly if there's heavy nausea coming, which can often happen when you work at a gut level. You know, I did another thing you could try, well, am I going to put it out, shamanic technique that I did a lot of when I was younger was, I mean, not massively younger, on my therapeutic journey. I worked with a guy called Ratu Bagas, who's a Balinese energy healer. And he used to make you shake for like 9 hours a day. And you'd squirt liquid tobacco, which is just tobacco mixed with water, for 10 minutes, basically into your nose, each nostril in your mouth. And it used to create phenomenal levels of nausea. And I would puke up eventually. It was hard for me to just vomit at the time very easily. But that also cleared quite a lot of gut blockages out somewhere, I have a feeling. I don't know exactly. But nausea and lightheadedness, often certainly the lightheadedness can precede the nausea, a sign that the some of the mental control is starting to kind of tense a little bit. It pulls your energy into the head. You feel lightheaded. Sometimes vomiting, though, it's quite confrontational to do that. If you're open to do that, you could give it a try. An exercise you can sometimes do with water, and that is to drink like a liter and a half of water, and then put your fingers down your throat and puke it up again. Don't do it right after eating for obvious reasons. It's good to do in the morning, you know, before eating. You can do stuff like that, and you know, it's a shamanic technique basically, but it's also an element of bioenergetics. You're getting the throat and the gut to start to spasm. That is what I would recommend if you're getting the lightheadedness. That's usually what I recommend for people in the center when I've got them open. But, you know, take it easy as well, because you're probably working on your own. But, you know, and you don't want to overdo it and spin yourself out. You've got to take things be responsible and take them at a practical level. But I think that would help. Cool, man. Yeah, I'll definitely do the gag reflex. Great. Don't know. Yeah, the tobacco's a bit. It's good stuff. You can get addicted to the tobacco. I found the squirting it up my nose. It gives you a hit. You know, it's terrible. But I mean, tobacco. You know, it's got a very bad rep in the West, obviously because it's in cigarettes and Marlboro, and they put 3,000 additives into it or whatever. But tobacco is also, you know, a healing shamanic plant, and the word is that tobacco taking tobacco by the old herbalistas or curanderos in South America taught them how to make ayahuasca, you know, which is quite a complex formulation. But they took tobacco first, the grandfather plant, I think, and then it taught them the grandmother, which was ayahuasca. Little story to throw in there. But, you know, I don't recommend this stuff, drug-based therapy, even tobacco. I do occasionally still take tobacco liquid. Sometimes you can drink a load in the evening, you know, don't eat anything first. And, you know, it can have quite a deep body-based experience with it. It's a powerful substance, tobacco. You obviously need to make sure you're not just using Marlboro tobacco. You know, that you've got Natural American Spirit is the main one I remember. I don't smoke anymore, not for decades, but that's the main one I remember that has got no additives in it. You know, otherwise you can look around for some kind of shamanic tobacco on the internet somewhere, or eBay. I'm sure they probably sell it. But the gag reflex is also great, and you can also do it. You know, when you gag reflex, you don't need to vomit. You know, just get the gag going, the throat going. Everyone's throats are super blocked. I'm planning in the community actually to do a bit of work with water purging and this kind of thing. Introduce a couple of shamanic things in there soon. Anyway, I've got about 5 minutes left today, and then I'm going to go out. So if you've got any desperate last-minute questions, now is definitely the time to ask them. Otherwise, one of my next basically, but you never know. I might manage a live stream from Kathmandu. That could be fun, hey? I think we're about 5.5 hours ahead there, so you're right out of the kind of US time zone, I guess. But we'll see. We'll see. That'll be a bit late. But I don't know if anyone got this message. I'm now allowed to put little messages out on my stream. I've been trying to work out a way to let people know when the live stream's coming, like a day or so early, so they can, you know, they can tune in if they want to do it. I don't know if anyone saw the little message. Feel free to let me know if they did, or in the stream in the comments underneath. That would be helpful to know. Otherwise, unless I give you another minute for any questions, anybody, otherwise I'm going to call it a wrap. I hope if you're watching, or you watch this later, you're doing your bioenergetics and you're not listening too much to the words of your defensive layer. You've got to stick with it. I've actually just finished nearly 2 months of doing this chakra breathing bow and arch, and that 8-minute arch that I uploaded on my site yesterday is like an element of that. It's one of the parts that you do, but it's a very powerful exercise. And I had so much trauma as a kid. You know, it's a lifetime's work to move it. But it's a great journey. It's a great journey. So, you know, you need to commit and get it done and keep moving forwards. Belly activation to be more selfish, and the boss. Yeah, belly activation and selfishness. You know, it's like when I say that selfishness is the challenge, you know, because we live in a society where we're always taught to be altruistic and stuff. And this is not, you know, it's easy in a sense to be altruistic and to give to others and stuff. But you know, and there's nothing wrong with it in a way, but the truth is you have to, if you really want to go on a deep journey inside yourself, you need also the willingness to be really selfish motherfucker at times, you know, because you can't get very far just by giving to other people. I mean, there is technically this thing called the path of love, which was part of the Osho journey as well. We used to speak about that devotional pathway, but the people I meet on it, they're rarely really centered inside their body. You know, I've been around the spiritual scene 20 odd years. You know, it's not just it's because I don't want it to be like, yeah, let's just be totally fucking selfish and fuck everybody else. But at the same time, you need that core that you can go there and you can do what you need, regardless of the family, regardless of your workmates, your friends and stuff like that. You need that core of self-belief where you can take yourself out of a situation that's not working for you. For most people on a deep journey in life, there'll be a time when they have to do that. I'm quite interested in the statistic someone told me the other day. I haven't really checked it out, but they're like, when you look at people, only 2% of people will be in their life. And if you want to be in that 2%, you know, to really step up and do stuff, I need to check the statistic out a bit more. But if you want to be them in that 2%, you need to have that core of selfishness. Not that you only that, but that you can develop like that. And it triggers the fuck out of people, man. It triggers people, but that finally is their issue. It's their issue. It's not your issue. And we are fed an awful lot of bullshit as kids about altruism and giving to others and liberalism and God knows what. And the bottom line is it's all to keep us down somewhere, you know, or if it's not, it's just severely misguided, you know. The Buddha's last words were, I mean, probably in a different language, but translated into English were, shine a light on yourself, be a light unto yourself. And what it means is, you know, look who you are. Look who you are. And you can only do that with a certain degree of selfishness, simple as that. You know, to say I'm important enough to really go for what I want, to do what I want, to look who I am. You need that. So I think I'll end that stream with that quote. Feel free to like and subscribe and all that kind of stuff, as the Americans say. And I'll try and get another video out this week. Should get another one out, a nice workout one. I know people want the workout ones, and I haven't been doing much of that stuff. But let's try and get another workout, maybe a good intense arm stretch one. Yeah. Okay, guys. I'll see you. I'll probably be back in the live stream. Will you make another one? Yeah, I always make live streams, but we might be one. It'll either be in Kathmandu next Tuesday, or otherwise I'll send a message out when it's going to be. Otherwise, it might be the week after or something like that. Okay, guys. Bye for now, and keep doing the bio. That's the bottom line. Keep doing it. No excuses, no defensive layer. Just keep doing it. Okay, over and out.